Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Couple of Nukes. As always, I'm your host, Mr. Whiskey. And one of the things we talk about on the show pretty often, a passion of mine, is mentoring the youth, working with the youth, and the importance of it, not just as parents with children, but just as people who are going to come across the youth in our lives. We are all mentors in the sense of we all play a role in someone's life. We all inspire or influence people, whether we know it or not. Now, stepping up and leading in mentorship is different. It's another layer of responsibility. It's that intention of actually going and doing it. And we are here with a guest today who is mentoring youth, not just any youth, but the troubled youth. And what I see so often, and what we've discussed on the show so often, is that so many parents and mentors play the blame game. They make the child the source of all the problems instead of looking at, well, what has the child been through? What is the child going through? What is influencing their behavior? And it's so important. And we're here with a guest today who has gotten down to their level and spoken with them one on one and spent time with them understanding their stories. And today we're going to focus on how sharing our stories and how the stories of the troubled youth can teach us a lot, not just about them, but about ourselves as well. So, Ms. Janine Hernandez, great to have you here. And could you please tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, thank you so much for having me. Yes, my name is Janine Hernandez. I am a mom to an amazing teenage boy. I am a number one best-selling author, a speaker, a book coach. I do a little bit of everything and I love it.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Yeah, and then just a brief overview about you run the Book Publishing Academy. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I founded the Book Publishing Academy about 10 years ago. I got started off by coaching writers one to one, helping them publish their books. And right around the pandemic, I switched to a group coaching model. And when everyone was going out of business because of the pandemic, my business went into business because everyone was home, bored, and they wanted to write books.
Yeah.
And we've grown to over 300 authors in the past since the pandemic. And it's just amazing experience to help people share their story vulnerably through books and documentaries.
Yeah. So before you were helping others be authors, you yourself had to become an author first, right? So could you tell us a little bit about that journey?
Oh, so I always knew since I was about 9 years old, I would always tell my parents that I'm going to grow up and become an author. That's like what I always knew since I was little. And so I started writing my first book of poetry when I was 12 years old. But back in the 90s, I didn't know how to publish. There wasn't the same accessibility that we do now with social media or AI or anything like that. So I just kept writing my book, but I had no idea what I was doing. And then when I turned 24, I finally was able to publish my first book under the mentorship of two great friends. And again, I still had no clue what I was doing. So I had to learn. I started to learn and go to coaching programs and different seminars to learn the industry. And then as I started writing books, people would just reach out to me and they're like, "Well, I want to do that too." And that's kind of how my business started was I just started helping people that would reach out to me.
So what was the first book that you ever wrote, or I'll say officially published, because I'm sure from nine to on you were writing little stories here and there and stuff, but what was the first book you published?
My first book is called Through My Eyes, and that was actually the stories that I started writing since from 9 to like 25. So they're all poetry, quotes, little short stories. It took me a very long time, but I got it published.
Okay. And I know you mentioned helping other authors publish their books, having over 300 authors, but how many books are you personally at now that are just your sole contribution?
I think it's nine, 9 books. And then we're
It's a good
working
sign
on,
when you lose track.
yeah, and then we're working on an anthology book right now. So that'll be 10. And I'm currently writing a book behind the scenes. That one has been a very slow progress for about a year. So, but that one will come soon.
Yeah, it's hard to write a book when you're helping like, 100 other people write books at the
Yeah.
same time. It's like I get that, but yeah, that's awesome. And yeah, so I want to connect this to, I did a whole spiel in the beginning of the episode, which wasn't too long ago, about the youth and troubled youth. What are you doing to incorporate writing and storytelling and the troubled youth? Specifically, I know you went on from what I saw on your social media, waited years for this opportunity that we're going to talk about. So can you tell us kind of about those years of waiting and where this idea first originated?
Yeah, so I guess I'll give you some background on myself. So I grew up in a family where we would go to the state penitentiary on the weekends to visit aunts and uncles. And so I've been involved in just that lifestyle and growing up in it. And I always felt like I wanted to give back. And on social media, I also get incarcerated people that will reach out to me saying, I want to publish a book, but they don't have the funds to do it. So I was like, okay, so there's a need there. How can I fulfill this need? And about 2 years ago, I did help a group of teens publish an anthology book. So most of them were high school teens, and then they did include probably about 20 kids from the juvenile detention center. So I was like, okay, so these kids do have stories and they want to share. And then I would say about 4 years ago, God just planted in my heart, and I started to feel that little pull of like you need to help people in the state penitentiary. And so it was something that I didn't really, because when I get an idea, I'm like, okay, we're gonna go for it, we're gonna do it, and I have all the plan. But I just started praying about it. I would pray about it and I would think about it. And then when the timing was right, it just landed on my lap. I got the opportunity. Someone connected me to someone in the juvenile detention center, and then I was able to go teach them for a week and a half, which was an amazing experience. And then now I'm helping over 100 of those kids publish a book, which is amazing. And they're excited about it too. So, yeah, that's kind of how that happened.
Is this an anthology with all of them, or are they each individually publishing a book?
It's an anthology, so they're all getting their own chapter inside the book.
And it's going to be, you said 100 of them?
It's over 100. The last time, I mean, I was working on it, I think it's probably like 130 kids.
Wow. Wow. So would you say that is going to be the biggest anthology you've made so far?
I would say yes. Yeah, it is actually. Yeah.
I say that's a lot of people, a lot of chapters. And so have you been able to kind of read through their stories yet, or just from talking with them, kind of like what's the age range on these children?
They are between the ages of like 13 to 17, right before they go to adult jail. But so these kids, I gave them three choices. I said you can write about your life story, about like what made you get here to this point. You could write a poem or a song or a lyric. Sorry, so those two options. And most of them decided to write about their life and what they did. And it was very interesting because I would say 98% of them, 99% of them, like you mentioned earlier, all of them had something traumatic that happened to them in their childhood that it just kind of snowballed and continued until their teenage years, or something traumatic that happened to them that caused them to start acting out in different ways. And so, yeah, and I had the opportunity to speak to a lot of them because they would ask me, they would call me Miss. So Miss. And so I would go up to them and they would ask me like, "Can you read this?" and kind of give me feedback. And over the course of that week, I read every single one of them and gave them feedback like, "Fix this, do this, write a little bit here," giving them just writing feedback. And their stories are it's so I don't even know how to explain it. It is very heavy to read a lot of what they have gone through. And I would say about 90% of them know that they want to get out of this lifestyle. They just don't know how because it has become normal for them. So,
Hmm.
um, yeah, it was definitely an experience to be there with them and helping them write their stories.
Yeah, I understand, feeling that way, especially as a mother, to see all these young people. And would you say what were some of the biggest issues? Was it just fighting with the parents? Was it financial hardship in the home? Was it not fitting in at school? A little bit of everything, or
Can I be extremely transparent? How
yes,
transparent can I be? Okay. So um deep things like sexual abuse, physical abuse in the home, um being a teen with murder charges, seeing someone getting murdered in front of them, uh, family members that are on drugs, but I mean like heavy, like fentanyl,
right,
meth, and then they end up doing it. So it's not like, oh, I just had a parent that just was mean to me and like no, these are like traumatic, like someone got sexually abused, but and the mom would allow it and kind of participate in it. So just crazy. Like I couldn't even fathom or wrap my head around some of the things that they were sharing that they went through. Um,
yeah.
yeah.
One of the things that's always kind of like shook me to the core on both my show and just in general, is the idea of the bystander family members when there's a member, especially a child being sexually abused in the family. I've often heard the same thing where it's like my parents knew and they allowed it, or my siblings knew and they allowed it or partook in it, and that's always just like blown my mind. And would you say it was very alarming the amount of childhood sexual like abuse and harassment that you read through or heard?
I would say honestly, sexual abuse was pretty low compared to more physical and drug related type of
Mm,
stuff. But I will say to touch on that, just from my personal experience and educating myself on sexual abuse, that sometimes the older generations are people pleasers and don't want to ruffle feathers, and it really it comes down to they protect the abusers because they don't want to ruffle feathers or have like the family as a whole looked at as a bad name, and they rather protect the family than to
yeah.
like stand up for that child that got molested. So it's not it's very horrible.
No, it really is. I just got done recording an episode a couple minutes ago, and it was on, men who were sexually assaulted and harassed or experienced sexual violence. And the statistics, we talked about how they changed from 1 in 17, a couple years ago to 1 in 4. And the change was that originally, anything where a man had penetrated another individual, even if they did not consent or initiated it, was not considered, rape or sexual assault. So all men who had been roofied or taken advantage of while drunk or on drugs, if they had penetrated, it was not considered. And so you had all these, including children, children who were taken advantage of. If the children had penetrated the other person who was technically the perpetrator, it was not classified as sexual assault or harassment and violence, which changed later on. And like hearing that this morning just blew my mind that we would say, oh, well, if you penetrated but you weren't the initiator or the perpetrator, then we're just gonna like throw that case away. Like that blows my mind. And of course, another statistic shared this morning was that it takes about on average 9 people to speak up against one perpetrator for that perpetrator to face justice. So it is, terrible, and it's even worse when it comes to children, And like you said, a lot of them don't normally speak about it. I had a man on the show the other day who had been raped by his father, and I think, decades passed before he ever spoke about it. And he shared terribly that the first two therapists he spoke to about it kind of just changed subjects. Like he tried bringing it up, and it was like, "Oh, we're not going to talk about this." So I know it's hard for men to speak up about it, and then especially children as well. Especially if you have bystander family members who are, allowing it. How much are you going to trust an adult who isn't a family member, right? Because your family is supposed to be your number one backbone and support system. So if I was a a child and I was sexually molested in some way or experienced domestic violence and my family members don't have my back, well, what is this random teacher gonna do? So I think it's important that we as non-family members make sure that, even if the family members aren't doing something that we're going to do something, but what would you say are some lessons that we could take away from what you read through and, learned as parents or as, family friends or even bystanders?
I think I can speak too from my experience because I'm a mother, is everything that we do, it has an effect on our children. And so it's unfortunate because a lot of us, maybe we go through some traumatic experience in our childhood and we don't start to really understand it till we're older, we're 30s or 40s, and really start to heal from it. But by that time, our kids are already like 10, 15, you know what I mean? So they went through it kind of with us as we were going through all of the trauma
Mm.
responses and dealing with the pain and masking it and not going and filing reports on sexual abusers or abusers, etc. And so I think it's hard because when you're in it and you're a parent and you have a trauma response and or you're still in that type of like chaos, it's really hard, but I would say go and get help because anything that we do is going to affect those children. And sometimes it might just be too late. You know, by the time that we figure it out, our kids are already 15, 16. They're already grown. They've already been implanted with all the things that we showed them or exposed them to when they were little.
Yeah, and same with I've done a lot of episodes on veterans and PTSD and a lot of them not dealing with it until they're 50, 60, 70. Like you said, their children had to experience all the side effects of that already. And now, what's interesting even is I did an episode that I thought was pretty unique on the generational trauma of Holocaust survivors. And not just like how did the Holocaust affect those people, but how did it affect their children and their grandchildren? And like the case studies on that were, I mean, it was just amazing episode to see like the generational impact we have in our own healing and journey. Like you said, I had a guest once say that children are like sponges, and I really like that analogy that they are just picking up everything around them, everything you do. The amount of relationship experts who have come on my show and talked about like what our children witness in our parents' relationship is what we'll tend to mimic or go toward, to the point that some people seek out toxic relationships because their parents had a toxic relationship and that's normal to them. So it's so interesting. And what can you say about, I mean, reaching these trouble, do you think you're giving them a chance to share their story? What can you say about second chances and, like their desire to want to like live a new life and not knowing how to? Like, what can we do to help, destigmatize the idea that, juvenile delinquents are set up for nothing but failure?
Yeah, it's really unfortunate because I would say there are a small few that I met that are like, eh, it is what it is. This is my life, and there's no getting out of it, and there's no really ex escaping my family too because they can't just estrange themselves from the environment. But most of them know that they need help and they want to get better and they have big dreams. And then when I came in and I spoke to them and I talked to them about all the things that I went through when I was a child, and even as an adult. And then I showed them my books and all the successful things that I was able to accomplish. They were like mind blown because they're like, we could do that too. I'm like, yes, you can. There are legal ways to make money. There are things that you can do to be a better person, right? So, honestly, I think it's just really pouring into the youth. Like just like I went into the juvenile detention center, or whether it be nonprofits that speak with them, because they're in their most vulnerable space when they are teenagers, because they're
Mm.
getting older, they have a lot of emotions, and they're starting to understand. These kids are so smart. Like they understand everything that happened to them, and they're learning how to cope with it too. And I'm honestly very proud of them because I'll give you an example. Like me, it took me 38 years to finally, truly, authentically share my story without being afraid of what my family thinks. And some of these kids are 14 and they're like, this is what I went through. And they were so vulnerable and so open. Um, so I think we really just need to help them as much as we can.
And would you say because of what you've been through, you were able to build kind of trust with them a lot more easily by being vulnerable and kind of showing that y'all were pretty similar?
Yeah, I definitely think me sharing my story of sexual abuse, of physical abuse. I also talked about how I would go visit my uncle and my aunts in state penitentiary on the weekends. So like sharing all of that, I talked about how I got kicked out of high school for fighting. Like I was very open with them, right? And then I would play music too. So I have a teenager, so I would like to think that I'm a cool mom. So they all looked at me and they're like, wow, she's really cool. Like, so they would share even more with me. They didn't see me as like this strict adult. They saw me as like, oh, she's really cool, miss. Like, we could really talk to you. So, I think that helped build that trust with them. Whereas I think if I would have gone in there and I have no life experience, they probably would have shut down on me.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And so how would you encourage people to kind of connect with the troubled youth? Would you say, I know you mentioned like nonprofits and other stuff, like reaching out to these juvenile delinquent centers and seeing like what we can do to reach them or what kind of programs they have available?
Yeah, so definitely the juvenile detention center, reaching out to them. You do have to go through some sort of background clearance to get approved to go in there and help,
Yeah.
but that is an option. I would say nonprofits that help troubled youth as well, or sometimes even just contacting schools. Schools love to have speakers come in and talk to the kids. So that is an avenue as well. But anything that you can do, I think even kids that might not have, like, they didn't have a crazy upbringing, but they still have, things that they go through. My boyfriend broke up with me, or I had a fight with a friend, and they don't know how to talk to their parents about it, but sometimes they trust a different adult.
Yeah. And you had mentioned early in the episode, God, what is your relationship with faith like and what has that played in all of this?
My relationship and my faith has definitely grown over the past couple years. So I grew up Catholic, went to Catholic school, and then I don't know, I just never was a believer. It was one of those things where I would go to church and I'm like, well, I don't believe that, and how is that possible? I questioned it a lot. And then I converted to Christianity. But even then, I was still very one foot in, one foot out. Like, I don't know that I'm a believer of this, but I'm gonna go to church because it makes me feel good. But I'm gonna still drink on the weekends and get drunk and go to church hungover. That's how I was. And then it wasn't until I would say about 2 years ago, I was in a physically abusive relationship. And in this relationship, my abuser introduced me to God on a different level. And so I started to read the Bible. But he would spiritually abuse me as well. He would use the Bible and scriptures and God against me to abuse me. And it's crazy because the very thing that he used to abuse me is the very thing that God used to get me closer to him. So I went through a really dark period where, because of the abuse that I was having or getting, I wanted to unalive myself. And it was like this spiritual warfare. I would see the darkness. Literally, I could see it and I can feel it. And then I could see God over here, like, you don't want to go down that path. And I finally ended up leaving that relationship, and my relationship with God got even stronger. And I started to see that everything that I had been praying for, God wanted to give it to me, all of my desires. And I also realized that God was with me along the way. I just had to go through a lot of different things to get to where I'm at. I would go through it all again. just so I can end up here with God. So, yeah, it's been a journey, and God just continues to surprise me. I keep like every day I pray, and I'm just like, I can't believe this. I can't believe this is my life right now because this is what I've been praying for. You know what I mean?
So I'm a contributing author for a book coming out on October 4th. Check it out. But originally what I wrote about was just religious weaponization because my father had like my story is kind of similar to yours in the sense that my father always twisted and weaponized religion to lift himself up and put others down. And he used to say that when I was born, Satan and the Legion wanted to name me Damien, that I was going to be the Antichrist. And there's a lot of times in my life where, and people often question, like, Mr. Whiskey, why would you ever believe you were the Antichrist? Again, like we talked about, when you grow up, what your parents say have a different authority to it, right? I mean, you believe your parents know everything. They made you, right? And so growing up being told that I was going to be the Antichrist, that I was evil and that there's a spiritual warfare going on over me like no other person, it really affected me. But ironically enough, because and I thank God all the time for this, because I'm such an intellectually curious person and very driven to truth and to facts, you know, I went and read the Bible because, my dad would always say X, Y, Z. And I got tired of it to the point where I read the Bible. And now it's like every time he says something, um, I'm at the point where I can quote verbatim. I'm like, well, actually, he says this, this. And, so now, and that's one of the things too. So many people suffering from church hurt, from hypocrisy, from blasphemy in their communities, or from spiritual warfare and suffering at the hands of someone who is weaponizing religion. Part of the foundation of being able to fight back isn't just having faith, but it's actually knowing the word. Because when you know the words, people can't twist it on you. It's just like a courtroom battle. When you've got the law right there and you see the actual words. So for me, it was the same thing where the person who used religion against me is actually what fueled my relationship with God and learning into it. So it is so interesting how sometimes, we come to God. But I love one of my favorite quotes from the Bible. It's from Genesis. It's when all of Joseph's brothers find him in Egypt during the famine, and they're like, "Oh no, he's gonna kill us. He's gonna hate us." And what he says to them is, and this is not verbatim, but he says to them, "What you intended for sin, God intended for the blessing and salvation of many." And people paraphrase it as whatever, the enemy intends for evil, God can use for good. And I truly believe that. So much of my trauma has been used to help other people. And now, do I wish for a world where no one experienced trauma and we were all happy and living good life? For sure. But I am very thankful that a lot of the people who have trauma are using it to help others. And I think that's why it's important to have platforms like mine and platforms like yours where we give people the chance to share their story, whether it's through podcasting or writing or whatever it is. And I think writing is an especially powerful platform because what you have, which we haven't mentioned, is anonymity sometimes. I'm sure you've had some authors who say, hey, I don't want my real name used. I want an author name. Or, hey, I want to tell my story, but kind of vaguely. So I think it's very, very powerful being able to share our stories.
Yep, it is. I love that quote too because or that verse because it's so true. It's like the thing that was supposed to tear you down ends up being the thing that brings you closer to God. And I do believe that our trauma, our childhood, all the things that we went through is really what helps us bring people closer to God. So, like I said, I would go through it again just so I could be here in this space, in this moment.
Yeah. And we're going to have JanineHernandez.com in the description below for everyone to check out. Um, but the reason I'm ending it early is because you and I will be recording in person together pretty soon here. So we'll go more into detail on stuff and you'll get to share about one of your books coming out that you've helped
Yes.
other authors put together. So we'll be meeting again. But today I want to have you on just to talk about, the troubled youth, because I do think it's so important we reach them because I mean, there's a lot of pressure to put on you, but Ms. Hernandez, your meeting with them maybe what actually changed their lives, that day that set them on the right path. And so it's so important to know, like, they call it the butterfly effect, dominoes, however you want to put it, the impact we have in people's lives. Like one conversation can change everything. Like everything I do with speaking, with addiction recovery, with suicide prevention, all that is traced back to a single conversation had on an aircraft carrier. And it was about a joke. It was a joke that was trending on the internet. And that conversation snowball down into what is here today. And so, same with you, having them, you may be the first time they ever opened up their story to someone, and now they have been empowered to continue to share their story, to not be ashamed of it, and to use it for good. So, I think it's so important that not just you, Ms. Hernandez, but everyone realizes that they had that same power in their hands with every single person they meet every day.
It's very rewarding to see that you can help other people through their pain.
Yeah, so thank you for coming on the show today and sharing about what you've done recently. I hope it was inspiring to others. And like I said, we're gonna have you back on. We're gonna take some pictures together. You'll probably have a cowgirl hat on and all that stuff. So it'll be a good time.
I can't wait. Thank you so much for having me. I truly appreciate it.
Sailing through the ocean blue, nuclear reactors my crew, guiding the ship, the stars as our guide, through the waves we ride, jokes and laughter fill the air. On this voyage we have to share, working together, side by side, as one family we will abide. In the heart of the ship we reside, nuclear operators with pride, powering the vessel with every stride. Our mission, a source of great pride.